Hey, welcome to Stuff to Blow Your Mind. My name is Christian Sager.
And I'm Robert Lamb, and this is our little video series here, Trailer Talk, where we just talk about podcast episodes that we have recorded, some that have published, and we tie that all up with some wonderful trailers from films we love to hate, etc.
Yeah, and so this is a little bit of a preview for you, our audience, because next week is going to be a week where we have episodes about mind control and Mindflayers, and we'll talk about that a little bit throughout these. But the following week, in the spirit of the season, we have an episode that Robert and I did that is all about exorcisms and how they relate to modern mental health. So we decided to pull together some of our favorite demon possession movie trailers to talk about this podcast premise along with.
Yeah, some of these are films that we mention in the episode. Some of them are just films that we ran across after the fact, remembered, oh yeah, that's a really cool exorcism film. And hey, you may have some familiarity with these as well. Feel free to chime in on the comments below here.
Yeah, please also, I want to hear from you throughout this. What's your favorite exorcism or demon possession movie? So why don't we get started with, of course, the classic, which is now 42 years old. This year, I think this week even, it came out.
It was like a post-Christmas Day release. That's the crazy thing to remember about The Exorcist. This is a Christmas film. This is a holiday film.
Yeah. So The Exorcist came out 42 years ago. Here we are with a classic trailer. We reference this a lot, obviously, in the podcast episode. But this is the movie that really changed how people in the West think about exorcisms and demon possession. I mean, I think it's almost impossible for people to imagine the idea of it without picturing the Catholic version that's presented here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great film. It's one of these films that I think a lot of us have, at least, even if you haven't seen it, you have some passing idea of it, just you've absorbed it from pop culture. But unlike a lot of films of this nature, take Psycho, for instance, like Psycho, you kind of have it spoiled for you, just by virtue of growing up in the world. The Exorcist, even if you know what's going to happen, there's so many subtle touches.
Yeah. And so what's especially interesting about this in relation to the episode that we covered is, first of all, it really grounds for people in the West who are unfamiliar with demon possession, what that means. For certain belief systems and religious cultures. It's especially interesting because The Exorcist, being one of the really big first ones of these, acknowledges that this is a practice that is also found in Africa, Oceania, all over the world. I mean, pretty much every continent, I think, has, except for Antarctica. Well, maybe there's some Antarctican demon possessions, but
no,
for the most part,
it exists in every culture.
Yeah, and so we didn't really have a lot of movie options to include something like that in, but it's worth remembering that in the beginning of The Exorcist, he's in the Middle East, I think, right? He's in Iraq, where he's digging up the Pazuzu relics.
Yep, there it was just then on the trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was a 73 film, based on the novel by William Peter Blatty, and then William Friedkin directed it.
Yep, yeah. And Blatty comes back. We're going to reference it later, but Exorcist III, Blatty comes back, writes, and directs that one. The thing about The Exorcist as well that's really interesting is, spoilers for a 42-year-old movie, what ends up happening isn't an exorcism. It's what's referred to as an adorcism, and that's something we talk a lot about in this episode. Adorcism is when, instead of an exorcist coming in and expelling a demon out of the possessed person's body, they draw it into themselves in a shamanistic practice, and then they sort of integrate it into themselves and then later expel it at a period in time, after the ritual. And that happens in The Exorcist. The priest takes it into his body. There it is. That they just showed the scene right there. Falls out the window, down those stairs, down that classic set of stairs. We were just talking about it with one of our videographers here, Ramsey. He said that he's been to this set of stairs. Anybody else been to The Exorcist stairs before?
I want to know if anybody sent a slinky down The Exorcist stairs. I think that would be the most appropriate use.
Yeah. You want to go to the next
Let's
trailer?
Go to the next one,
Okay.
yeah.
This is one of the trashiest demon movies that I've ever seen, but it has a soft spot. I have a soft spot in my heart for it. It's called Beyond the Door.
Oh,
There's
yes.
the door itself.
1974.
So basically, the way I've heard it is that The Exorcist was so crazy popular that a lot of Italian-based movie companies wanted to try to copy it. Beyond the Door was one of the first of these. So it was produced by an Italian company, but it was shot with American actors, and it's in English. But it's very much, as you can see from this trailer here, Exorcist influenced. There's a scene where she twists her head around, does the whole, I think she vomits, all the things that happen in The Exorcist. But Beyond the Door is just like the trashier version of The Exorcist.
You know what gets me is that, especially for this time period, you saw a lot of cases like this where a big budget American film came out, made a splash, and then there were a lot of European low budget tie-ins and remakes and ripoffs. Oh, that's
beautiful. She looks like Kirsten Dunst, we were saying earlier.
But so many of these pictures, though, for instance, Jaws came out. And there are so many Jaws ripoffs, and yet there seem to be far more Jaws ripoffs than there are Exorcist ripoffs, despite the fact that to rip off The Exorcist, you just need three people in a room.
Yeah.
But to rip off Jaws, you've got to have a big, unconvincing shark. Like, even Jaws did not really have a convincing shark.
Have you ever heard of Hookjaw before?
No.
So apparently this was like a tabloid comic in the UK, I want to say in the late 70s, early 80s, because of Jaws' success. It was all about a shark just like constantly chasing people around and eating them in boats and stuff. But it was like super exploitative. And they just started re-releasing it this week. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to reading that. Anyways, so here's Beyond the Door. We're seeing the typical stuff you associate with demon possession, levitation, vomiting, heads turning around, all that stuff. But the thing to remember here is that in the real world, there are a lot, like way more than you would think, cases of reported exorcisms and demon possessions. And one of the things that we try to focus on in this episode is the way that mental health is trying to connect with this. Because some mental health practitioners believe that maybe it's a dissociative identity disorder, or maybe it's schizophrenia, or maybe it's something else, some other kind of mental disorder. In fact, possession trance disorder was attempted to be added to the psychological lexicon, what was it, 1994, I want to say off the top of my head. It didn't make it. But it's considered a real enough of a thing that the practice that is recommended through a lot of the academic papers that we read for this episode was that you as a psychologist or a counselor going into a situation where you're dealing with somebody who thinks they're possessed should become well versed in that specific religious culture's belief system so you can help the patient. And vice versa, the exorcist should do the same with psychological practices.
Right. Now, to be clear, there's no such thing as demons. So, spoiler for real life. But one of the things here is that in treating people who believe they are possessed by demons, it sometimes is helpful, it's often helpful for the secular treatment to have some idea of what sort of spiritual narrative is being invoked by the person who's suffering this. And we go into the various reasons that people are drawn into these demon possession narratives and ultimately the exorcist narrative as well, just because it might have to do with cognitive dissonance. It might have to do with schizophrenia, auditory hallucinations. There are so many different psychological scenarios that lend themselves to this sort of fantastic interpretation.
If you want to hear like a real deep dive into this stuff, definitely tune into the episode when it comes out. Not next week, but the week afterward. We're giving you a holiday preview a good 10 days in advance.
Yeah, next week is all going to be mind control, hypnotists, and illithid mind flayers.
All right, let's go to the next one. We've got, is it The Visitor?
I believe it is The Visitor, 1979.
This is one of my all-time favorite movies. It was just recently re-released by Mondo's, the Alamo Drafthouse's film wing.
Yeah.
And it was shot here in Atlanta, where Robert and I are based out of, where we're shooting right now and talking to you. Oh, there it is. This is the scene that takes place in the Omni, which is now the CNN Center.
Nice.
There's an ice skating rink there. So a couple of years ago, I want to say last year, maybe a year and a half ago, there was a screening of this at iDrum, which is one of our local art houses, and they managed to find the little girl from this. She's all grown up now. She lives just outside the city, and I think she runs a beauty salon. And she came down and talked about her experience making this, again, another Italian-produced knockoff demon possession movie with lots of birds in it. It's got a bizarre and amazing cast. You've got John Huston as the like Obi-Wan Kenobi figure trying to exorcise her. Lance Henriksen, very young Lance Henriksen. Shelley Winters. And then Sam Peckinpah shows up for a little
Franco
bit.
Nero's in it?
Franco Nero is like alien Jesus in it.
Wait, Sam Peckinpah's just acting in it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
These guys are directors, John Huston and Sam Peckinpah, but they show up and act in this thing. And Sam Peckinpah, let's be honest, like, if you watch this movie, he seems like he was pretty drunk when they shot that scene, and I think they might have overdubbed his lines with somebody else. But he's in the movie.
Now, one thing I like, you were telling me about this earlier, is that this is a movie shot in Atlanta, and that doesn't mean anything much today because it seems like everything's shot in Atlanta these days. But virtually nothing takes place in Atlanta except for some seasons of The Walking Dead and the television series Atlanta, which is excellent. But I wish more of these series would just, take place in Atlanta. Atlanta's a weird, strange city, just as weird and strange as awful as any other city. Why can't we have superheroes?
And this movie absolutely makes use of... It's funny, a lot of the architecture that's in this is stuff that's still around today. Even though this movie is almost 40 years old. There's a lot of scenes that are shot down where Georgia State University is now. They shoot in the basketball arena. Neil Bortz shows up in it. He's a local, radio celebrity?
Yeah, kind of a conservative radio talk show.
Yeah. There's just some great scenes that really capture Atlanta in this, and it's stunning how little has changed when you watch it. But, so this is a very tangentially loose demon possession movie. I think the plot is something like that there's been this alien battle going on between Jesus and Satan, but they're from outer space, and somehow or another this girl is like the reborn version of Satan. Okay. And so John Huston, who's kind of God alien, goes to Earth to sort things out. It is one of the most bonkers movies I've ever seen, and I highly recommend you check it out. I think it's streaming on Amazon Prime if you have that, but pay for it if you can too. It's well worth seeing. All
right, well, let's head on to the next one here. This would be none other than 1990's Exorcist III.
While we're transitioning,
Legion,
check
I believe.
out these. Oh, we had some people who just said, hi, Merry Christmas. Hi, Katie. KD? Or Kate. I can't tell. Sorry, the comments are far away from us, but thank you for saying hi. And yes, Merry Christmas. This is a very Christmas-oriented episode.
Exorcist III.
Yeah.
Because we have George C. Scott, we have the wonderful Brad Dourif, who I think we talked about in the last one of these.
Because he's a perfect creep.
Right, yeah, he's a perfect creep and was in, I think we were talking about Angel films, right?
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, a lot of people knock the Exorcist sequels. Exorcist II is not great, but Exorcist III I genuinely think is a good movie. There's two scenes in particular that you'll see here in the trailer that really make it shine. There's the old lady climbing on the rooftop, and then there's the scene where the killer jumps out of the shadows with a giant pair of garden shears and cuts somebody's head off.
Yeah, that is one of the greatest jump scares, I think, in cinematic history. I'll put it up there with anything.
And it's got George C. Scott in it. How could it be bad? So George C. Scott is playing the cop from the first Exorcist movie. Like I said earlier, this is written and directed by William Blatty, so it is an official continuation of his story. It also has Jason Miller from The Exorcist. He's basically, the idea here is that they have a serial killer that they think may be possessed by the same demon that was Pazuzu. There's the old lady climbing on the rooftop. And here's the shears.
Yeah.
There we go.
They give everything away in this trailer, don't they? You don't even have to see it now.
But Brad Dourif plays the killer, but then, Jason Miller's personality is in there and a bunch of other personalities of people who have been possessed over time by the same demon.
Oh yeah, and if you just need any other reason to see it, Samuel L. Jackson shows up as like a dream man, and Fabio plays an angel. So what more can you want?
So there's a really interesting parallel here for the research that we did in that this is one of the few demon possession movies that really does connect home with, at the time, what was referred to as multiple personality disorder, and now we refer to as dissociative identity disorder. And so the idea that this killer has 6 or 7 different personalities and one of them is this demon lines up very well with how medical professionals do tend to treat demon possession cases when they come into them. Although dissociative identity disorder, from my understanding from the research that we looked at, is something that has to be handled very, very carefully. We talk about integration as one of the treatments for it, but it is not by any means, I guess I would say, like something that's completely defined in the medical literature as how to handle it.
All right. Well, at this point, I think we should head on to our next
Do you recognize
clip.
the doctor there? He's the guy who plays Herschel in The Walking Dead.
Oh,
He's the guy who has the big beard in The Walking
Dead.
That's him.
Huh.
Yeah, that's like a younger version.
I didn't recognize him, though.
Yeah. All right, so our next one here, this is a more recent movie, which probably a lot of you have seen. This was pretty popular, I think, right, when it came out?
I don't know. This is one I have not seen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think you'd like this.
Yeah?
The Last Exorcism.
Okay, give me the sell. Give me the sell. Why should I watch The Last Exorcism?
I really like it because it is it has the whole found footage thing going on, but what I like about it is that it approaches the exorcism thing from the position of a former preacher or a current preacher who's lost faith, and he's working with the documentary crew to purposely prove that exorcisms are fake.
Okay.
And so he goes in with them, and the one exorcism he goes to prove is fake turns out to be a real demon possession, and he has to get his faith back in order to turn it around. It has a lot of interesting scares. It plays on dread really well, I think. This actress is particularly good. She goes from being just kind of like a innocent ingenue to being this utter maniac, demon-possessed woman. But it's especially good for us because this is, again, like another, they go in thinking, oh, this is just somebody who's mentally ill. We're going to trick her kind of like hick father into thinking that we're actually doing something religious here. And in actuality, it turns out like the tables get turned on them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I enjoy it. The sequel is terrible. The sequel's really bad.
Well, it's called The Last Exorcism. You can't make a sequel to The Last Exorcism.
And the cover to the sequel of The Last Exorcism is her bending her body into the shape of a 2.
Oh.
Yeah, it's so
That's
cheesy.
not even a yoga pose.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's interesting because it does approach the whole exorcism thing in a film standpoint from immediately saying like, all right, there's a mental health issue at hand here. The preacher in particular is aware of that, and he goes into the situation thinking of it as more of a psychological situation.
So he goes into it with a skeptical approach.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. He's lost his faith and he has to kind of re-find it at the end in order to save the day. Which it's, based on the ending, it's kind of debatable whether he saves the day or not. But it's a great movie.
Okay, well, what's the next one here? What is our penultimate pick? The Possession, 2012.
Oh, yeah.
This is another one I have not seen.
Oh, okay.
And you'll have to sell me on.
So,
who directed this?
I don't know the name of the director, actually. It's probably somebody who's started making a lot of these, what are they referred to as, micro-budget horror movies. But the gist of this one...
I thought it was, is it the guy, is it Goyer? Is this a Goyer
No,
picture?
that's The Unborn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, The
Sorry.
Unborn we almost did, but we chose The Possession instead.
I have all the Exorcism films I haven't seen are
mixed
kind
up
of
in
one
your head.
picture in my mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Possession's interesting because it, like we were talking about at the beginning with The Exorcist, most Western-based exorcism, demon possession movies focus on a very Christian standpoint, especially the Catholic one. And The Possession is a version of mysticism in that it brings in a Dybbuk and a Dybbuk box into the scenario, and that's what ends up possessing the little girl. Also, rapper Modest Yahoo is he makes an appearance as the exorcist. He's like a rabbi exorcist that they bring in to help them deal with this. It's got, again, for Walking Dead fans, Jeffrey Dean Morgan is the father dealing with his daughter's possession. It's one of these like PG-13 horror movies, so some people might not be that into it, but I thought it was pretty effective with what it did. And one of the reasons why I chose it for this was so that we could see how many different cultures have demon possession as a part of their just internal philosophy.
Yeah, it seems like even if this is just again, I haven't seen it, but even if it is just a rehash of the typical Exorcist film, you at least get a different cultural wrapping.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, like, they pull out all the same tricks from the last 20 years of exorcism movies, But yeah, you get like the different sort of angle on it of seeing, like there's a whole scene where I think he goes to like Brooklyn or something like that and consults with a bunch of rabbis and they talk to him about it. Matisyahu comes with him. The end scene, the exorcism scene, takes place in this like therapy room in a basement of a hospital. I liked it okay. This part's cool too. The demon sticks its finger up her mouth. That's cool. All right, we got one last one, and this is a classic.
Yeah, you might not think of it as a possession film, but the original Ghostbusters features two very memorable possession scenes. We got Dana Barrett, played by Sigourney Weaver, possessed by the demon Zool, the gatekeeper, and then Louis Tully is possessed by the demon Vince Clortho, the keymaster.
Yeah, this is classic. There's no exorcisms in this movie, but there is certainly possession. Yeah.
Well, but ghostbusting is a form of exorcism.
That's true.
We talked about that. It's kind of the secular exorcism. It's you could almost compare the scientific ghostbusting in this fictional film to a purely medical, psychological approach to some of these mental illnesses.
And they do sort of have that as like a setup in the beginning of the movie, if I remember correctly, in that like they're based out of a psychology department. They're sort of shunned academics,
right? Because
they actually believe in this stuff. But the idea is essentially the same, right? That these are psychological effects that you can test and measure. It's just these guys end up building proton packs and blasting the ghosts out of people instead. Yeah. Have you seen the new Ghostbusters?
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it.
There's possession in that too.
Oh, that's right. The villain it's a possession situation.
Yeah. Man, this movie. Oh, such a classic. It always makes me smile every time I see it. But yeah, what a great movie. And this is a good one to end with. It's not as gory or particularly horrific as any of the other movies.
Those
that we just
frightening.
chose.
I mean, the scenes in this that are serious and frightful are really as terrifying as anything you'll encounter in a horror film.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a kid. Like, because I think most of us saw Ghostbusters when we were younger, and that, like the scene when Zool first takes Sigourney Weaver's character and pulls her away into the fridge. That's terrifying.
Yeah, that's a classic where the hands pop out of the chair and drag her. So all right, this is the last one that we've got, but I want to know if anybody out there that's tuning in, you have questions for us? Do you want to know a little bit more about exorcism, about adorcism, about the psychology connected to it, or do you want to just talk to us about demon movies? Because we will do that all the day long.
Somebody give me a good Hong Kong demon possession movie.
Ooh.
I would like to watch one of those.
What do we got here? Somebody says, I didn't know that micro-budget horror movies were a thing. Do we think they're the new B movie?
I don't know. Micro-budget everything is a thing.
Yeah, I mean, Paranormal Activity is like the classic example of this because it costs like next to nothing to make it, and I think it like turned around like something like 50 times the amount of money that it cost. So there's a lot of horror movies in particular that get made on micro-budgets because it's a gamble that doesn't have a lot of risk.
Yeah, I mean... And sometimes it pays off. And that, I guess the thing with low budget films, and one of the things I love about low budget horror films in particular, is that inevitably there'll be 6 things that are just broken as hell. But you'll have 1, maybe 2 things that really work. So you have this crap fest of a movie, but then there'll just be a diamond in the middle of it. You know, maybe it's one performance, maybe it's a special effect, maybe it's just the music, but something works. And that's why I keep coming back to it.
It ends up leading to future better things, too.
Yeah.
Whether it's that performance or maybe it's the writer or a director, and that's their, like, jumping-off point to go on and do better things. Yeah, absolutely. Man, now I wish I could remember who directed that Possession movie.
I know. I hated that I set you up for that, because I was thinking it was Goyer.
I'm pretty sure it's not him, but yeah. I wonder what that guy's doing now. I saw that movie all by myself in Washington, D.C. I was just like visiting Washington, D.C., and I went, you know what? It's time to go see a demon possession movie. But that's kind of how I do. So let's see. Do we have any other questions here? Doesn't look like it. Oh, we got a name for the director. It is Ole Bornedal. I've never heard of that person before, so... Huh. Well, Ole, if you're out there, let us know what you're working on.
Yeah, look him up on IMDb out there, and I'm sure he's got some projects brewing.
And if you're interested in, the fun and games that we had here today on Facebook, don't forget to tune into the podcast. We're going to be talking about exorcisms, About 10 days from now, next week, we're going to be talking about the science of Mindflayers from Dungeons & Dragons and the science behind real-life mind control. Also, you can always go visit us at stufftoblowyourmind.com. That's where we've got all of our podcasts, all of our videos, and blog posts, including the Monster of the Week and Monster Science stuff that Robert does, which really has inspired this whole thing of us diving into horror movie trailers and digging the science back out and bringing it to you.
Yeah. So, hey, this will be the last one of these for the year, so we'll catch you in 2017. We have a lot of cool things planned. We have a lot of TBD planned. So if there are particular topics you want us to explore, let us know. You know how to find us, and you can also send us an email at blowthemind@howstuffworks.com.
Have a good holiday.